Glad. Good morning, morning. I'm so happy that I've followed on from Harry and Meghan. Can you just leave them alone, please, Piers? You're doing everyone's head in.
Mate, with respect, what part of them giving endless primetime TV interviews do you think means they want to be left alone?
Well, just if you know how to deal with it, just leave them alone.
They don't want to be left alone.
If they want, yeah, but just leave them alone because
Shall
if
we
that's
leave
what
them
they want,
alone in this interview?
If you don't want to talk about them, why bring them up?
Leave them alone.
Yeah, but they don't want to be left alone, do they? They're doing primetime interviews.
Leave them alone.
Well, they don't want to be left alone.
How are we still talking about
Anyway,
them?
it's beautiful here. It's beautiful
Good.
here, Susanna.
Let's move on to your specialist subject, shall we?
So we need to talk about this, because when Kevin Pietersen looks at Piers Morgan on live television and says, "Can you just leave them alone, please? You're doing everyone's head in," that wasn't casual conversation. That wasn't colleagues disagreeing politely about a topic. That was a national mood being articulated. That was collective exhaustion, finding a voice. That was someone finally saying what the comment sections, the group chats, the kitchen conversations have been saying for years. Leave them alone. Now, let's set the scene properly and understand what led to this moment. Piers, once again, brings up Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. Because of course he does. It's Tuesday, or Wednesday, or literally any day ending in Y. The sun rises, birds chirp, Piers mentions the Sussexes. It's become as predictable as the tides. Kevin, visibly over it, initially tries to steer the conversation away diplomatically. You can see him trying to redirect. But instead of a polite detour, instead of letting it slide, he goes straight for the jugular of common sense. Can you just leave them alone? Once, twice, 3 times, 3 separate times in quick succession. That's not accidental. That's not him forgetting he already said it. That's emphasis. That's the verbal equivalent of turning off a car alarm that's been screeching nonstop since 2018. And Piers' response? Oh, this is where it gets interesting. What parts of them giving endless primetime TV interviews do you think means they want to be left alone? Ah, yes, the sacred logic of British tabloid theology. If you speak publicly about your own life, you have permanently surrendered your right to peace, privacy, boundaries, or any expectation of proportional coverage. So let's unpack that argument, because this is where the mental gymnastics reach Olympic qualification levels. Harry and Meghan give interviews. Yes, they do. They've spoken to Oprah. They've done their Netflix documentary. Harry wrote his memoir, Spare. They've discussed their lived experience publicly. They talk about mental health struggles. They talk about experiencing racism within the institution and from media. They talk about institutional dysfunction and lack of support. They talk about trauma. Harry's lifelong trauma around his mother's death. Meghan's suicidal ideation while pregnant. They tell their story, their version, their truth as they experienced it. And according to Piers' reasoning, that means they are now permanently, irrevocably fair game for relentless daily personal commentary about every aspect of their existence. So, by that logic, let's extend this logic consistently. Every journalist who writes a column wants to be psychoanalyzed daily by strangers. Every TV presenter who discusses their personal life wants their marriage dissected on air by critics. Every politician who shares their background wants their childhood trauma mocked for sport on panel shows. See how absurd that sounds when applied universally? Kevin clocked this immediately. And this is what I love about his response, the clarity of it. He didn't get pulled into debating whether Harry and Meghan's interviews were strategically wise. He didn't argue over their PR approach. He didn't get dragged into palace talking points about duty and service. He didn't engage with the substance of any Sussex controversy. He simply said, in essence, this is too much. Leave them alone. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that Kevin understands, and that Piers seems constitutionally unable to grasp. You can dislike someone without dedicating your entire media identity to them. You can disagree with someone's choices without making them your daily content focus. You can think someone made mistakes without turning their existence into your personal Groundhog Day loop. Revolutionary concept, I know, but apparently it needs stating. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture here, because Kevin's frustration reflects something much larger than one TV moment. Since stepping back from royal duties in early 2020, Harry and Meghan have built a life in California. They've launched Arkwell Foundation, they've produced content through their Netflix deal, they've advocated for mental health, veterans through Invictus Games, women's empowerment, humanitarian causes. They've lived their lives. They've raised their children. They've existed as human beings. And somehow, their basic existence continues to trigger a small but extraordinarily loud sector of the UK media ecosystem into absolute meltdown mode. There are newspapers that run daily Sussex updates like they're reporting on essential weather patterns. Cloudy with a 90% chance of Meghan breathing air in Montecito. It's exhausting. It's beyond exhausting. It's reached levels of repetition that would make a broken record seem varied and dynamic. And Kevin's visible frustration on that show reflects something significant. Even people who are not hardcore Sussex supporters, who might not follow them closely, who might not even particularly care about them, even those people are tired of the same outrage cycle spinning endlessly. Because here's the pattern that's become so predictable you could set your watch by it. Harry speaks about something meaningful, mental health, veterans, philanthropy. Outrage, how dare he? Who does he think he is? Meghan attends an event looking polished and professional. Outrage, she's too polished, too staged, too trying too hard. They stay silent for weeks or months. Outrage, they're plotting, they're calculating, silence is suspicious. They make a quiet donation to a cause. Outrage, because it wasn't loud enough, wasn't public enough, wasn't performative enough. They make a public statement about something they care about. Outrage, because it was too loud, too public, too attention-seeking. It's like arguing with a smoke detector that goes off whether there's actual fire or you've just made toast. The response is identical regardless of the stimulus. Piers insists repeatedly that Harry and Meghan don't want to be left alone because they give interviews and speak publicly. But let's be intellectually honest here for a moment. Wanting to tell your story, wanting to correct what you believe are false narratives about your life, wanting to speak your truth about experiences you've had, that is not the same as wanting or inviting a daily commentary series dedicated to analyzing your emotional existence. Harry didn't write spare and include a note saying, "Please, Piers, respond to every chapter every morning for the next 5 years and make my personal trauma your primary content source." Meghan didn't sit down for the Oprah interview thinking, "This will be fantastic ongoing content for my loudest critics' primetime monologues indefinitely." There's a massive difference between speaking about your own life and inviting obsessive fixation from others. And what Kevin did in that moment was call out the obsession directly, not the criticism, obsession. There's a psychological and behavioral difference that needs to be clearly understood. Criticism is occasional, it's analytical, it's contextual, it engages with specific actions or statements, it's proportional to the subject matter. Obsession is repetitive beyond reason. It's emotional rather than analytical. It's predictable in its intensity. It focuses on the person rather than just their actions. It's disproportionate to any reasonable measure. When someone says, "If you don't want people talking about you, don't give interviews," while simultaneously bringing them up unprompted in every conversation, while making them the centerpiece of daily content, while ensuring they're discussed whether they speak or stay silent, that's not principled criticism. That's not holding public figures accountable. That's obsession wrapped in a thin veneer of journalistic justification. Kevin basically handed Piers a mirror in that moment, and the reflection wasn't flattering. And the best part? Kevin's tone wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive, it wasn't angry or combative, it was weary, tired, the tone of someone who has heard the exact same argument 400 times and is just done, just completely done with the circular nature of it. Now let's talk about why this matters beyond just one TV clip, because there's a larger economic and media ecosystem at play here. The Sussex narrative has become an entire industry. It's not hyperbole to say that. Entire YouTube channels dedicated solely to Sussex criticism, newspaper columns that reliably run Sussex content multiple times per week, panel shows that can fill airtime discussing their every move, podcasts analyzing their statements, endless commentary ecosystems that have been built entirely around this one couple. And here's the uncomfortable business truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Some people have monetized their disdain for Harry and Meghan so thoroughly, so completely, that if the Sussexes disappeared from public life tomorrow, half their content pipeline would collapse like a badly built gazebo in a strong wind. That's not an exaggeration. That's economic reality. Rage sells. Outrage generates clicks. Negative Sussex content performs reliably in engagement metrics, so it keeps getting produced and produced and produced. But here's what's shifting. Fatigue is creeping in. When a former elite cricketer, someone who knows a thing or two about media scrutiny himself, looks at a broadcaster mid-show and says essentially, "We are all tired of this," that's cultural shift energy. That's the beginning of a narrative exhaustion point. Kevin Pietersen understands media glare intimately. He's been a public figure in British sports for decades. He's been scrutinized, criticized, adored, and dragged through public conversation. He's made mistakes and been called out. He's celebrated victories and experienced failures. He knows the difference between legitimate accountability and unhealthy fixation. And what he saw in that moment with Piers wasn't balanced analysis. It wasn't proportional criticism. It wasn't contextual commentary. It was repetition for its own sake. It was content as habit rather than purpose. Here's another fascinating layer to this entire dynamic. There's a weird paradox in constantly claiming someone is irrelevant while simultaneously proving they are the most talked about topic in the room at any given time. If Harry and Meghan were truly insignificant, if they were truly irrelevant nobodies, as some critics claim, there would be silence about them. Natural, organic silence born of disinterest. Silence is the real indicator of irrelevance. When someone genuinely doesn't matter, people stop talking about them. The conversation naturally moves on to things that do matter. But that silence hasn't happened with the Sussexes. Not even close. Instead, we get headline marathons every time Meghan wears beige. Beige, a neutral, inoffensive color. And it generates think pieces, analysis, commentary about what the beige means symbolically. The fact that a neutral color choice can generate multiple opinion pieces tells you everything about the proportionality problem. Kevin's plea wasn't about censorship. Let's be very clear about that, because I know how these things get twisted. He wasn't saying never discuss them. He wasn't saying ban all Sussex coverage. He wasn't arguing for suppression of legitimate journalism or analysis. He was asking for proportion, for perspective, for some sense of balance. Because when the same two names dominate every conversation, every debate, every cultural rant, regardless of topic, you're not analyzing anymore. You're not providing insight or news. You're circling. You're stuck in a loop. And viewers notice this. Audiences aren't stupid. They're smarter than producers and content creators often give them credit for. They see the pattern. They see the repeated outrage over minor things. They see the forced indignation. They see the content being stretched thinner than phyllo dough to fill airtime and column inches. And when someone finally says on mainstream television, "You're doing everyone's head in," it resonates because it feels authentic. It feels like someone broke the fourth wall and said what the audience has been thinking. There's also something quietly poetic about this moment that's worth acknowledging. For years, literally years, Harry and Meghan have been told to stay quiet, to stop speaking, to stop sharing their perspective. When they speak publicly, they're accused of seeking attention, of being unable to handle privacy, of wanting to remain relevant. When they don't speak, when they stay silent for months, they're accused of plotting something sinister, of calculating their next move, of manipulating through absence. It's a classic double bind. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. Now we have a mainstream media figure saying publicly, maybe the media should try silence. Maybe the obsessive commentary should stop. That's a role reversal. That's a twist in the script, and it's worth noting. And let's not ignore the emotional and human subtext underneath all of this media circus. Harry has spoken extensively and openly about mental health struggles, about the impact of media intrusion on his life from childhood, about losing his mother in circumstances involving paparazzi pursuit, about generational trauma cycle he's trying to break. Meghan has described in detail the psychological pressure and isolation she felt as a working royal. She's spoken about experiencing suicidal ideation while pregnant and feeling unable to get help. Now, regardless of where anyone stands politically on the monarchy, regardless of whether you think they should have stayed or left, regardless of your feelings about their choices, at some point the human layer has to matter. At some point, we're talking about two actual people, a family, children growing up, human beings with feelings and mental health and capacity for pain. And Kevin's plea of leave them alone cuts through all the political analysis and institutional debate and lands on basic humanity. Let's be blunt about something. If Piers genuinely believes that Harry and Meghan thrive on attention, that they want to be discussed constantly, that any coverage helps them, then the most devastating, most effective move he could possibly make would be complete indifference. Silence would be the ultimate statement. Ignoring them entirely would prove his point perfectly. But silence doesn't generate ratings. Indifference doesn't fill airtime. Not talking about them doesn't create viral clips or trending moments. So instead, we get the loop. Harry speaks, panel reacts, clips circulate, social media engages, rinse, repeat, endlessly. Kevin broke that loop for 30 seconds, and those 30 seconds felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. Fresh air, a break in the pattern. It's almost funny how simple Kevin's intervention was. Not a dissertation, not a carefully constructed argument with multiple points and counterpoints, not a debate. Just 3 words, repeated 3 times. Leave them alone. There's real power in simplicity. Sometimes the most effective statements are the shortest ones. Sometimes cutting through complexity requires directness. And there's power in expressing fatigue honestly. When the public starts feeling exhaustion instead of outrage about a topic, when eye rolls replace engagement, the outrage machine starts losing its fuel source. This clip isn't just an entertaining moment between 2 men on television. It's not just a viral moment or a good soundbite. It's a snapshot of where public conversation is heading. It's a marker of cultural shift in progress. Less hysteria, more eye rolls. Less performative anger, more, can we please talk about something else now? Less engagement with each new Sussex story, more fatigue with the repetition. Harry and Meghan will continue living their lives in California. They'll launch projects through Archewell, they'll show up for causes they care about, they'll speak when they choose to. They'll maintain whatever level of public engagement they decide is right for them. And certain commentators will continue reacting to every move, every statement, every choice. But moments like this Kevin Pietersen intervention showed the dynamic shifting underneath the surface noise. Because when even colleagues, when people on your own side of the media industry start saying on live television, you're doing everyone's head in, the volume might need adjusting. The approach might need reconsidering. At the end of the day, you don't have to love the Sussexes. You don't have to agree with their choices. You don't have to think they handled everything perfectly. But if their mere existence is dominating your emotional bandwidth daily, if every show becomes about them regardless of topic, if you can't go a week without bringing them up, that's worth examining. That's worth questioning. Kevin examined it in real time on live television, and he chose simplicity over spectacle, directness over debate. Leave them alone. Not because they're untouchable, not because they're flawless, not because they're beyond criticism, but because obsession isn't sustainable, because proportion matters, because audiences deserve varied content. And honestly, everyone deserves new material at this point. We can debate monarchy reform. We can discuss media ethics. We can analyze institutional accountability and public funding. We can have serious conversations about all of those things. But maybe, just maybe, we don't need to treat two people living in California like a breaking news alert every single morning. That's not journalism. That's not analysis. That's not even entertainment at this point. That's habit. And habits can be broken. Even on live television, even by cricket stars, even with just 3 simple words. Leave them alone. Thanks for watching, everyone. If this resonated, subscribe for more honest media analysis. Let's keep calling out obsession when we see it. Until next time, stay balanced, stay proportional, and maybe give the Sussex content a rest. I'll see you in the next one.